Good morning, brothers and sisters. This morning, Pastor Joshua will lead us to study the book of 2 Kings, chapter 24. It's a miserable chapter. Don't listen to God's words. The people didn't listen to God's words will surely be destroyed, as what God said. The nation of Judah, they are facing destruction, starting from Manasseh, going towards destruction. God never forgive them. But because of Josiah, before the total destruction, God still showed them grace. Josiah was the best king. No other king can be compared with him. He kept the laws, observed the festivals, the Passover, to break the idols. And God said to him, Manasseh's sin was still there. He would never forgive. Because of the faithfulness of Josiah, doing what is good in the eyes of God. God extended his days. He was king for 31 years. During the time of his reign, there is peace in the nation. But after Josiah, will God's judgment come? Yes. Why God's judgment came? It's not like Josiah. It's not like the time of Josiah. There is a truth here. Even though God destined to send down calamities, as long as man is willing to repent and turn to God, God still showed mercy and grace. In chapter 24, we could see 3 kings here. They succeeded as king. But they did evil. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord. No one was like King Josiah. Everyone was like Manasseh. They did evil, always doing evil. Then God's judgment came. The nation of Judah has fallen. And the 3 times they were taken captive. The whole nation went towards destruction. God really wants to preserve a lamb for the house of David. When we look at it, the lamb seemed to be destroyed. But God has given them a little grace. God still worked. Man always did evil. But God's judgment will surely come. What makes God's judgment come? Here it tells us it's not that we have done wrong. It's not good enough, then God will judge us. God still show us grace. But because of the wickedness of people, then they are being destroyed. So God cannot show grace anymore. But the promise to David's house from God is still there. God will not snuff out his lamb. God's promise to David is still there. This is our God. From the false Bibles, for false scrolls of kings, we see what God is like. And we see ourselves, what kind of person I am. Because we don't listen to God's words. Going towards destruction. Just like what God said. The title is, This is What God Said. Because God has spoken through all the prophets. Now we can see here is Jeremiah's generation. As recorded in the book of Jeremiah, the prophets continue to speak to the kings, starting from King Josiah. Jeremiah started to speak up. He spoke to Josiah. But we see that Josiah did really good. In his generation, then the nation is not fallen yet. His son can succeed him as king. But just like Ahab, the king of northern Israel, he did evil. But God destined that judgment came. And all of a sudden, King Ahab knelt down before God. He bowed down himself. He humbled himself, pleading with God for his mercy. He humbled himself. That's why God said to him, in his days of his reign, he would have peace. But after him, when his son succeeded him as king, then his dynasty just passed away. Now it seems that history is repeating itself. Josiah was a good king. Just like Ahab, while they are in judgment because of the sin of Manasseh, his father's sin, he knelt down. He kept the law and did what is good in the Lord's eyes. He became the second Moses. Now, as what Jeremiah the prophet said, the northern kingdom is just like a fruit, a basket of rotten fruit. Nothing can restore them. It must be forsaken. So how about the sons succeeding King Josiah? They were like a rotten fruit. A rotten fruit must be thrown away. Cannot preserve it, cannot use it anymore. So we can see the history recorded here. Judah must be forsaken and destroyed. As what God has spoken through the prophets. I want to add on. Chapter 23. Talk about the death of King Josiah. He was such a good king, the best king, like second Moses. But his death was like Ahaz, the death of a bad king. Let's look at the last paragraph of chapter 23. Verse 29, chapter 23. Here talk about Egypt was raised up. King Pharaoh Necho. He attacked Assyria. And we can see that Assyria was gradually diminishing. That at that time, Syria is the center of the world. North Africa, we have Egypt. And then go further up, we have Israel. We can see the surrounding neighboring countries of Israel. So at the very beginning, Aram was a great nation. And because the fighting between Israel and Judah, the king invited Assyria. Judah invited Assyria to defeat and destroy Aram, and also destroy northern Israel. And then he came again to attack Jerusalem. At that time, Assyria was raised up. But the southern part, Northern Africa, Egypt was still there. These are the two strong nations. But at that time, we could see God blessing Hezekiah. Hezekiah was raised up. He's like a second David. His nation was prosperous. At that time, Babylon is more in the eastern part of Assyria. It is like Iraq today, Iran. The envoy of Babylon came to see the nation of Judah, knowing that Judah was so strong at that time because Judah could defeat Assyria. It's not being fought by Hezekiah. It is the angel of God fighting for Hezekiah. This is the environment at that time. This is the situation. Judah was very strong at that time, the nation of Judah. And God increased 15 years of age for Hezekiah. The life of Hezekiah cannot pass the test. Once Hezekiah won the battle, not after that he died. He was about to die, and then he cried out to God, and then God gave him 15 years more. And eventually Manasseh was born. And this has created the corruption of Judah. And Judah, who used to be the strongest nation at that time, but now is a nation connecting with Medium and Spiritus. This is Manasseh. That's why God cannot stand the wickedness of Manasseh anymore. Originally, God said, I will not snuff out the lamb of the house of David, but he had to destroy Judah. Manasseh reigned as king for a long time. Eventually, the nation of Judah was so corrupt. So it was so corrupt that the whole nation fell into darkness. That's why here we see the bloodshedding, the scene of bloodshedding goes from this side to the other side throughout Jerusalem. I believe that he sacrificed men on the altar. the whole nation fell into darkness and to be destroyed. God didn't remember them. Darkness reigned over all. The whole nation was facing destruction. While it's about to be destroyed, King Josiah rose up to save, just like Moses. However, as recorded in the history, even Moses reappeared, then the nation of Judah cannot be saved. So King Josiah can maintain peace while he's still in reign. But at the end, King Josiah didn't listen to the words from Pharaoh, Necho. Because Pharaoh Necho was supposed to come and fight against Assyria. We see that the power of Egypt also rose up. Assyria was diminishing. Further away, Babylon was rising up at that time. And this is being prophesied by God in the time of Hezekiah. Because King Hezekiah loved to see the envoys from Babylon because of his pride. That's why God prophesies that Babylon will be, Judah will be sent to exile to Babylon. I'm telling you, this is what the Lord said. What God said will surely come to pass. On the other side, Babylon rose up. So Assyria was diminishing, was falling. Egypt at that time was coming over to attack Assyria. If he won the war, then he would become the greatest nation and even can fight against Babylon. Then Egypt would become the strongest nation in the world. But at that time, when Egypt was about to march out to attack Assyria, Josiah hindered them. Because at that time, Judah, the nation of Judah, was reviving. He wanted to rise up, to block Egypt, to hinder Egypt. In fact, it's not necessary. We just need to follow God. We don't need to interfere in the politics of the world, in fighting who is the greatest. It's not about what type of weapon you have and how great you are in order to manipulate the whole world. It's not that you have won a certain battle and then you can reign the history of the world, because it's only God who reigns the history. This is our stance. This is our life. We only need to follow God. Josiah shouldn't have gone out to hinder Pharaoh Necho from attacking Assyria, but he went. And he was short death. And Megiddo, he died there. His corpse was carried back to Jerusalem. Just like King Ahaz. A good king, for a good king, the way he died. It's just like a bad king. What is the truth here? It's telling those who went into exile and also telling us nowadays. Sometimes we see that a good man had a bad ending. In King Josiah, we see that he has brought about peace to the nation. And then, to a certain extent, he rose up. He wanted to be the greatest nation. He has changed. For a good man in the era of cursing, he could end up like the wicked people, just like King Josiah. He was the best king. But the way he died is just like King Ahaz, who is a bad king. Why? Because he's under curse. How do we apply to us nowadays or to the Jewish people under exile? To the Jewish people who went into exile, they were under curse. The nation has fallen and there's no protection for them. Even though they themselves are following God, however, but they would face the bad outcome, just like King Josiah. Why? This is the curse brought by the environment, by the situation. Of course, if we do good, God will give us grace. But when we are under curse in the big environment, we will also face the curses. We know that history, God reigns history. We have to pay these prices. Eventually, we know God will do good to us. We know this is the right way to go, but we still have to pay the price. In all these changes, we see that God really protects us. God has been leading us step by step, building us up. Amen. Let's continue to follow God this way. There is no guarantee that you will not be affected by the sins in this big environment. This is how I see the death of King Josiah. I'm touched to share with you. Now let's come back to chapter 24. There are 3 paragraphs, verse 1 to verse 7. Man's wickedness. Let Judah be destroyed. And they went into captivity. Here I talk about Jehoiakim. First paragraph is about the reign of Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim is the son of Josiah. Should be the brother of Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz is smaller than Jehoiakim. Both of them are the sons of Josiah. When Josiah died, his second son, Jehoahaz, succeeded him as king. We know that Jehoahaz did evil. When we come to chapter 24, verse 1, during Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded the land. And Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Verse 2, the Lord sent Babylonian, Aramean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against him. He sent them to destroy Judah in accordance with the word of the Lord, proclaimed by his servants, the prophets. Surely These things happened to Judah according to the Lord's command, in order to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all he had done, including the shedding of innocent blood. For he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was not willing to forgive. Chapter 23, verse 37. And he did evil. Jehoiakim did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. At that time, Jehoiakim did evil. We see King Josiah was good, but he died. His son Jehoahaz rose up. He did evil as well. And Jehoiakim, the same as Jehoahaz, both of them did evil. That is to say, Josiah's son, the two sons, did evil. In the time of Jehoiakim, Babylon was growing stronger. Egypt was diminishing, was falling at that time. Assyria was destroyed. Under these two strong power, during Jehoiakim's reign, the prophet Jeremiah rose up. Jeremiah told them, we are about to go into exile because of the sins of Manasseh. Now, Egypt was falling, diminishing. The prophet prophesied that Babylon will take Judah into captivity. This is prophesied by Jeremiah. So, Jehoiakim, you should not rebel against Babylon, because Babylon has already invaded us, attacked us. Let us not change. Jeremiah asked the king, do not change. Do not rebel against Babylon. But at that time, the Israelites and also the officials of Judah, they wanted to rebel against Babylon. Thinking that Egypt, there is still hope in Egypt. They wanted to rely on Egypt. Jeremiah already told them, Egypt is like a broken pool. We must trust in the Lord. He is our living water, the fountain of living water. We must follow the Lord, but not depend on the strength of the people, the power of the people. Now, the Lord make us be defeated under Babylon. Let us continue to follow Babylon. This is the heart of God. Even though you don't like Babylon, you have to follow them. Otherwise, we will have that calamity. Jehoiakim became Babylon's vassal for 3 years and then rebelled against him. So is the power about the political power and the words of God overcame them because everyone wanted to rely on Egypt. Then the Lord rose up Babylon. Verse 2, the Lord sent Babylonian, Aramean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against him. So the power of Babylon already cover Aramean, the Moabite, and the Ammonite. That is the whole of like Asia and also western part of Asia. They came to attack Jerusalem and destroy Judah. Judah was destroyed in accordance with the word of the Lord by his servant and the prophets. And this calamity came upon Judah. Surely, this is what God has destined. Verse 3, surely these things happened to Judah according to the Lord's command, in order to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all he had done. The nation of Judah was destroyed because Jehoiakim didn't listen to God's words through the prophet. That's why the nation was destroyed. Verse 8 to 17, how about Jehoiachin? Jehoiachin is the son of Jehoiakim. That is the grandson of King Josiah. The prophecy towards the house of Ahab. In the time of Ahab, there was peace, but when it comes to his sons, the nation will be destroyed. It's the same for Josiah. During the reign of Josiah, there was peace as said by God. But when it comes to his sons, the nation has fallen. Now it's Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin is the grandson of Josiah. It seems that he's not under the curse. Verse 8, Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king. But he did evil in the eyes of God. Even the grandson did evil. Verse 10. At that time, the officers of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, advanced on Jerusalem and laid siege to it. At that time, Jehoiachin and his mother and his officers, all the officials, they surrender to King Nebuchadnezzar. They came under Jerusalem. Verse 11, Nebuchadnezzar himself came up to the city while his officers were besieging it. Jehoiachin, king of Judah, his mother and his attendants, his nobles and his officials all surrendered to him. It is right that they surrender to Babylon. It is God who rose up Babylon. This is his will. And we see that the whole nation of Judah went into captivity. This is the second time they went into exile. Jehoiakim is the first time, and in the time of Jehoiachin is the second time they went into captivity. We look at verse 14, the second part. Only the poorest people of the land were left. He carried into exile all Jerusalem. Only the poorest people of the land was left. All of them, almost all of them, went into captivity, except the poorest people. Now, Hong Kong, we have this research and the census. The poorest district, Kwun Tong, the second poorest district is Kwun Tong, the place where I was brought up. I was given birth under the foothill of Lions Rock Mountain. The village that I was born is called Fu Mei Estate. So when I went back to the place where I was born and found the Fu Mei Street, so it's around the radio station. There is a Lok Fu MTR going towards the Baptist hospital. I remember at the age of 6, I already moved out of that place. So it's around Dong Tao estate. From Lok Fu to Dong Tao estate. When I went back, and I still found that Fu Mei Street. But I still remember when I was small, some British army came to our estate. Why do I remember? So when it came, they brought along a lot of food. So after they march around, then the little kids will rush out. And the soldier at that time will lift up the little children, and while we were on that truck, then we had a lot of bread. So at the age of 6, we moved to Kwun Tong. That's the place where I grew up. It was very poor. Can you imagine? There are 18 districts in Hong Kong. Remaining only 2 districts, for the rest of the districts, went into captivity. What would Hong Kong be like? I'm really thankful here. I believe wherever 611 go, that district will prosper. When we first came to 611, 2007, now it's almost 14 years. We see that the Tsuen Wan district is getting better, more prosperous. Now, Tsuen Wan becomes the 7th richest district in Hong Kong. So this is the report and the research made, the statistics. At the beginning, when we first came here in Tsuen Wan, we were very poor. In the past, this is the 2nd poorest district. But now it comes to the 12th. I believe that God is raising us up and bless us in this place. Now when we look at the nation of Judah, they went into captivity. All these mighty warrior, fighting men. You know, those warrior, they fought the war. They have knowledge. They have power. And all these professional. Here talk about the craftsmen, artisans, the people in the palace. All of them were carried into exile to Babylon. The whole of Judah was in exile. And then verse 18 to 20. King Zedekiah, he also did evil. Who is he? Zedekiah is one of Josiah's sons. His brother was Jehoiakim. After Jehoiachin went into exile, so this guy Mattaniah, verse 17, Jehoiachin's uncle. So Jehoiakim was the elder brother. Zedekiah is smaller than Jehoiahaz, sorry. But these 3 sons, they did evil. Jehoiachin, the grandson of Josiah, also did evil. We see that Zedekiah also went into captivity. It was miserable. Now, let's talk about Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim rebelled against Babylon. He wanted to rely on Egypt. The whole nation made that decision. Or maybe they drew lots. And eventually they wanted to rely on Egypt. And eventually Babylon came to attack them, destroy Judah. And he had put Jehoiakim on bronze chain. It's not being chained hand in hand and foot to foot, but use a bronze to chain inside the bone of the shoulder. So making 2 circles and drew him to Babylon. So before Jehoiakim went outside Jerusalem, he died. Jehoiachin surrendered. He didn't die. There is a grace for him here. When it comes to Zedekiah, he went to rely on Egypt. He was destroyed by Babylon. Also, he's being chained by this bronze chain and brought to Babylon. Before King Babylon, and killed all his sons before his very eyes, killing the sons one by one. This is the last scene. He saw all his sons being killed as Anne took out his eyes. This is the outcome of Zedekiah. He didn't listen to the voice of God, and he has such miserable ending. We could see that God has given grace to Jehoiachin. After a few years in Babylon, then King Babylon showed him grace, rose him up. God promised David that he will not snuff out his lamb. When it comes to the grandson of Josiah, then he preserved the lamb a bit. And after they went into exile, they also returned to Jerusalem. There were 3 times going to captivity, but 3 times returning. As what God had said. Brothers and sisters, today we study the last part of Judah's history. Even man is under judgment. If we do good again, we still see God's grace. But when we see all these kings, including Jehoiachin, the 3 sons of Josiah did evil. They are so wicked. Even under curse, they did evil. They saw the good things about the father, Josiah, but they didn't learn from him, but they learned from the wicked people, and they were still under curse. God would not forgive them. But even though, when God see Jehoiachin, the grandson of Josiah, he went into captivity. But he was gradually raised up by that time. We could see the grace of God there. Brothers and sisters, in conclusion, what God said will surely come to pass. We must listen to the words of God. God is full of grace. Let us not have a hardened heart. while we can still repent, then we turn back to God, no matter what the environment is. Let us not look at the environment. We have to look upon God. May God bless you.